अपने युवाओं की आईटी एनर्जी के माध्यम से अपना एक रुतबा खड़ा किया है और भारत इसके बात के लिए गर्व कर सकता है। दुनिया में हम आंख में आंख मिला करके बात कर सकते हैं। और ये मेरा साथ मैं हमेशा कहता है, आईटी प्लस आईटी इज इक्वल टू आईटी। इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी प्लस इंडियन टैलेंट इज इक्वल टू इंडिया टुमारो।
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ELET's second BFSI Security Summit 2020. I, Harshal Desai, on behalf of the Banking and Finance Post magazine and ELET's Technomedia Private Limited, welcome you all to this edition of Virtual Conclave, which is being hosted today. Thank you so much, all those who are participating today in this conference, all our esteemed speakers, all our esteemed partners, all the audience. I welcome everyone to this amazing BFSI Security Summit, which you will be witnessing entire day today and you will be participating today in. As many of you are already aware, the Banking and Finance Post magazine has been publishing this bi-monthly magazine for a long time now, and we have been regularly organizing conferences, and so far we have been really very fortunate that we have been able to welcome experts from this industry, from the banks, from the NBFCs, from the insurance companies, and we have been able to welcome private players who are offering their services, their technologies and their solutions to the entire BFSI domain. Continuing this tradition, continuing this legacy, we are now today organizing the second virtual ELET's BFSI Security Summit. And we are very grateful to everyone who are today taking time out to participate in this. To start our day, I will like to invite the person who has always been consistently encouraging the entire BFSI team to organize these conferences and to create such knowledge sharing platforms. Dr. Ravi Gupta is founder and CEO at ELET's Technomedia Private Limited, and he is also the editor-in-chief for the Banking and Finance Post magazine. Welcome, Dr. Ravi Gupta. We request you to please appear on the screen and address the gathering today with your welcome address. Thank you so much.
Namaskar. I am Ravi Gupta. I am editor-in-chief of a magazine called Banking and Finance Post. I'm also the CEO and founder of ELET's Technomedia Private Limited. And ELETS is a 17-year-old media and research company which has been focusing on building communities around various sectors of business. And we have been publishing print magazines on health, on education, on governance, and also on banking and finance. And Our magazine on banking and finance has been there for almost 5 years now, and we focus on innovations happening in the banking and finance sectors. Today, we are proud to bring you our Banking and Finance Security Summit. This summit holds importance in the context of the increasing IT adoption due to the COVID situation, and we are uh, also doing this conference in this focus on banking and finance sector, especially focusing on IT security. And this is the key concern area today. Many of our organizations in the BFSI sector have shifted to work from home mode, leading it to the situation that a lot of sensitive data of the organization is going outside the offices, and the physical offices are still not yet fully operational, and the customer acquisition process, sales process, delivery process, customer retention processes, HR processes, all these processes have gone online in a big way. And more adoption of digital means more concerns about security. So this event is a focus on security issues in the BFSI sector. We are thankful for our technology partners, Dell Technologies and VDA Info Solutions Private Limited, and our exhibitor, Tata Tele Business Services, for partnering and supporting this event. We also thank our health and wellness partner, Panacea, and also our 3D platform partner, Avatar, for providing 3D virtual experience for this online event. So I welcome all our eminent speakers and eminent delegates who are joining us for this very important event. Thank you for joining us, and we have a very interesting agenda lined up over the whole day, and I hope you enjoy the sessions, and we are looking forward to your feedback. Please visit our website bfsi.eletsonline.com, which is getting updated daily with the latest information on BFSI sector news, views, and articles. Looking forward to your participation and engagement in the summit. And I also request you to follow us on the social media on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, where you will find daily updates about the BFSI sector. With this, thank you so much for joining us. Let's have a great day today. Thank you and namaskar to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi Gupta, Chief Executive Officer and Founder, Elets Technomedia Private Limited, and Editor-in-Chief, the Banking and Finance Post magazine, for the welcome address. After the welcome address, we would like to launch the special edition of our magazine, of our bi-monthly magazine, the Banking and Finance Post. And I would request my team member to please have the launch on the screen. Thank you. Thank you so much, team. As you are aware, the Banking and Finance Post magazine is one of the prominent magazine that covers latest trends and technologies from the BFSI domain. in its issues. We are very well there on the web space also. I hope many of you are already aware of our web portal. I request everyone to please visit it also, the bfsieletsonline.com. All the content that we publish in our magazine is also hosted on our web pages as well. We have a very strong social media presence on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram as well. I request everyone to please follow us on all these social media platforms and keep yourself updated on the latest trends and technologies in the BFSI domain. Thank you so much. And one more thing I'd like to request everyone, if you want to publish your articles, if you want to publish anything which is important, anything which is relevant for the BFSI domain, please get in touch with us. We will review the content, we will review your submissions, and we would publish it in our magazine and on our web portal as well. Thank you so much. Now, after this launch, we will start our next panel discussions. Would like to brief everyone today. All the panel discussion, I'll read out the subjects that we are going to organize these discussions today on. The first panel discussion is on cyber forensic across BFSI sector, need for incident response and threat hunting. This is the first panel discussion of the day. The next panel discussion will be conducted on prioritizing cloud and data security in the era of digital transformation. After that, we will conduct the third panel discussion, which will be on rebuilding cybersecurity norms with the new normal. This is the third panel discussion. Our fourth panel discussion will be on forward-looking cyber secrecy and the organization. This will be our fourth panel discussion. And after that, we will conduct the last panel discussion for the day, which will be on how organizations are, step charging their information security strategies and guarding themselves against emerging security threats with these rapid disruptions and fast changing innovative technologies. This will be our fifth and last, of course, not the least, panel discussion for the day. We again are thankful to all the experts who will be participating in these panel discussions today and all the moderators who will be moderating these sessions. Our first panel discussion, cyber forensic across BFSI sector, need for incident response and threat hunting. I would like to inform everyone that this panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Shankar Jadhav, Managing Director, BAC Investment and Head Strategy at Bombay Stock Exchange. Welcome, Mr. Shankar Jadhav. Participants in this panel discussions are the key speakers: Mr. Ashton D'Cruz, CAO, CGO, CISO, and Head CCNS Governance, NetWest Markets PLC India, the Royal Scotland Group. I welcome Mr. Ashton D'Cruz. Thank you so much for accepting our request to be a panelist in this panel discussion. I thank Mr. Biju K and I welcome him, Chief Information Security Officer at Federal Bank. I also welcome Mr. KV Deepu, President and Head of Operation India at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. And these are the panelists. I welcome them. And now I would like to hand over this virtual dais to our moderator, Mr. Shankar Jadhav. Thank you so much, Mr. Shankar Jadhav. Over to you now.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Deepu, Biju, and Ashton. Welcome to the panel discussion. Let me start with you introducing yourself for a moment. So can Ashton start with it?
Hello and good morning to my co-panelists, and thanks to the team, the ILETS team and the banking and finance team for having us on this panel. So I'm Ashton D'Cruz. I am part of the NatWest Markets PLC India Bank, which is we are a corporate bank in the country. And within the bank, I actually hold the role of Chief of Staff, which is basically a Chief Administrative Officer, Governance Officer, as well as CISO responsibilities. Yeah, thanks, Shankar.
Biju?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you, ILETS, for giving me the opportunity. I am Biju. I represent Federal Bank. I'm the CISO for Federal Bank and also head of operational risk management. I'm in this position for the last 10 years.
Deepu?
Good morning, everyone. Good to be with all of you, Shankar, Ashton, and Biju, and of course the audience. I handle digital transformation at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance in my role as the head of operations, customer service, communities, and business process reengineering. Prior to joining Bajaj Allianz, I worked with G Capital for 20 years. Excited to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Let me also introduce myself. I am Shankar Jadhav. I am Managing Director for BSE Investments Limited, which is the holding arm of Bombay Stock Exchange. And besides that, I also head strategy at BSE. I look after BSE's data center infrastructure and the IT procurement team. Good morning. Let me start. I want, Ashton, you can start with the importance of preparedness in today's world for not only the incidents related to IT, but any incident which can affect the IT scenario and the customer expectations.
Sure, Shankar. So before I start, I just want to let the team know that the views and opinions that I express here are actually being made in my individual capacity and may or may not be subscribed to by the organization that I represent. So with that, I will take your query, Shankar. So again, the subject here, what we are going to be discussing today, talks about cyber forensics and incident response as well as threat hunting. A very interesting subject, something that I was excited to, and I quite like my fellow panelists here also. So there's going to be some interesting thoughts that we're going to share with each other today. But first, let's try to get the basic differentiation between cybersecurity and forensics. So cybersecurity, the main objective of cybersecurity actually is in terms of prevention. Forensics, on the other hand, is more of a response mechanism. Okay, so within the cybersecurity world, and as most of us are basically fulfilling the role of a CISO or a risk officer in this forum and on this panel, we are taught to be able to build enough ourselves robust procedures, systems, landscapes, infrastructure to be able to prevent a breach. And that's what our objective always is. We basically try to keep our organization safe from a breach. On the other hand, forensics is how we best respond to a breach in a way, and how we basically look at what has happened, analyze it, and try to contain it as well as remediate, etc. So what we are going to be discussing here today is somewhere actually in between prevention and between response. Okay, and that's where the importance is. So just to get back to your query, what is important is basically maintaining the fine balance between prevention and response. So, and being ready for when we have to move from prevention to response, so that the transition that we have between prevention and a response is minimum. Okay, in what is the speed that we have when we realize that there's been a breach to be able to effectively and efficiently respond to it? That is what we are trying to discuss here, and we are trying to help share with all the audience here. So that's where the importance lies, and that's what we are trying to come to here. And again, as we say, in terms of any response, what is critical is to be able to understand where the breach has occurred, and to be able to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and why to do it. So those are the 4 questions and 4 parameters that we have to answer to be able to recover from a breach. I'll leave it there. I'll request the others and the panel to share maybe some more insights. Mr. Shankar, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Okay. Hello, Deepu. Can I request
now we can
you
hear
to
you.
talk about your experience and how you manage to do this, where you inform, you take care of the forensics and also prevent what's going to happen in your company?
You're asking me, Shankar?
Yes, Deepu.
Okay. Thank you. I think Ashton, gave a very good, start to the entire, proceedings. So there are multiple aspects to it, Shankar. On the one hand, as Ashton pointed out, we need to focus on the hardcore, technical aspects of cybersecurity and forensics. We, of course, have a dedicated team. We have partners, who advise us. We have also ensured that, especially when people began working from home, we ensured that from an asset perspective, from a training perspective, we were right up there. I don't think I need to go into those details because today is pretty much par for the course, across every organization. The one aspect which I want to focus on is the human element. I think very often, we tend to underrate this because, as they say, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. I think no matter how much we invest in terms of, 24/7 SOC, or, we focus on the latest state of the art, detection software. At the end of the day, human error, is what can cost, a lot. So we have focused a lot in terms of, training our people, because now from work from home, it becomes all the more essential. A strong deterrence in terms of policy, ensuring that people are aware, and more importantly, other than just the what and the how, it's also about why. I think the moment people realize, why any single piece of information digitally, if handled wrongly, what it can lead to. I think that has, led to a substantial increase in awareness. And as they always say, there are 2-3 factors, which bear this out. One is what is the culture, and because culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we have seen from a culture perspective that pretty much, we have seen a lot of seriousness. The second you look at is the impact, and that is from an incident perspective. Thankfully, so far, we've been able to keep our head above water. So I think these two aspects, clearly validate the fact, that our strategy has been in the right place.
Biju, let me move a little forward from here. Let me ask you, the regulators have been very keen to make sure that people understand the consequences of what happens in their company and the information provided to the regulators and others. What is your view on it, and have you had such incidents where you had to take care, and how did you do it?
So the question is very relevant in the cyber security area. So when we analyze why the regulator has put up such a restriction, as we all know, sharing of information is very critical as far as handling cyber incidents are concerned, and because most of these incidents are common in nature. So one incident which has hit a particular institution, it can happen in other institutions also. So sharing of information on a timely basis is very, very important. That helps other institutions to take adequate precautions and preventive action so that they are not hit from such an attack. So that is why in my view, regulator has given strict instructions to all the entities, regulated entities, to ensure that proper reporting happens. There's a timeline defined for that. This is to help the overall industry to be prepared and to take timely action against any kind of issues which are happening. So that is applicable and very important as far as banks are concerned, because as we all know, financial institutions are one of the prime targets for the hackers, whether it is a nation state actor or a small group. So that is very, very important as far as cyber incidents are concerned. That's my view.
Let me add to this. Let me add to this discussion. Just a few days ago, we have heard of a very major big bank was asked by the regulator to stop getting more customers, etc., for their incident that occurred where their IT software failed. We have incidents of regulators which says for every breach of some audit observation, they will charge you a few lakh of rupees for every observation. Do you think these consequences really help people to be alert? I think so. At the same time, the biggest worry is the customers are no more demanding. They seem to be thinking that IT is a tough job. Every day there are so many attacks and things are happening. And they seem to be giving freedom to people today because they are doing work from home. At the same time, people don't realize that we have to have policies, both the IT policies, incident response policies, and what we should tell the media. So in my view personally, I believe there's an incident, a company should come out through their PR or other organizations and tell the people what's happening, the relevant people, and also do what is required to be done. So how many of you have set policies for incident response which are known to your non-IT fraternity in your company, and how do you get it? Let me start with Deepu this time.
Yeah. Well, Shankar, I think it's a relevant question. And of course, we have a policy. And of course, we have communicated that to our employees at large, because cybersecurity is not the exclusive responsibility of a few folks in the organization. As I mentioned in my previous answer as well, it is a responsibility of every single individual, and that's why we have ensured communication at large. Now, coming to your point around whether these penalties do they incentivize companies to focus more. You see, there are a few things which are which are important here. Firstly, why do regulators impose penalties? They basically impose penalties because they want to ensure that there is seriousness all across. The other thing which we all need to understand is that, especially now that we have had this work from home at large, mandated by COVID-19, new risks may emerge. The other day somebody was asking, when we were in a discussion, and I don't think anybody had a clear answer. Work from home is not simply copy paste from work from office. When somebody physically goes to an office, he goes to one office. If somebody is work from home, can the manager certify that the employee, or rather his employee, is not working for two companies? It becomes very difficult, to give that certificate. So, which is why it's very extremely important to ensure, because now we have somebody sitting, right? You could have presentation. Earlier, you had a presentation in an office, and you put it up. People don't take photographs, but when you're sitting at home now, and it could be a very confidential presentation because you need to discuss, right? Everybody is connected virtually. How do you know somebody is not clicking photographs? So you see, the entire paradigm has changed. So which is why the accent on cybersecurity has become so strong today that you just need to communicate to everybody down the line through a very strong deterrence mechanism. People need to be clearly told that any you know any malaction on this front and the consequences can be severe.
Ashton, any view on this?
So I again quite agree with Deepu and even what Biju said in earlier. So first and foremost, regulators, why do they want us to share information? It is because it enables all banks, all financial institutions, all organizations, if it's within the manufacturing space, within some other space, to be able to understand a pattern and prevent something from hitting them before it gets to them. So if you know that one company has been breached, one organization has been breached, and that information is shared at the right time in the right form down to all the others within the industry segment, then you basically get a better understanding and you're able to gear up for a possible threat to your own infrastructure. Coming to where Deepu had finished again, and this is the peculiar nature that we have with this pandemic and the work from home or work from anywhere, as they call it. So we don't like to now term it anymore at work from home. It is basically work from anywhere, remote working. You could be at home, you could be in a park, or you could be in a resort. It doesn't matter anymore. But you don't really know that besides the person who's actually authorized to view information, who all are in the background, who actually has access and a view of the same type of information and data, and also the knowledge that is being shared. Even if it's over a audio call, if it's on a speaker phone, there is information being passed on, discussions, threads that are being had, and who all are listening into it, who all is recording it also. So this is something that we have had to look at in a large way. And that's where it becomes important to have embedded into our incident responses or even to our security awareness setups, the components of both awareness for staff, and this is right across the hierarchy, right up from the C-suites and the boards to the lowest rung within the organization, and at the same time communication. Communication here is important on two parts. One, to be able to understand who says what and when, and two, to be able to be transparent enough in our communication, both internally and externally, so that there is no hidden agendas or hidden truths that could later harm us. What I mean by part one, who says what when, is again, it's not right for everyone in the organization to keep on communicating and putting out bulletins on social media saying that we have been breached, this is what has been exposed, this is what has been, what is the effect on the company. That's also not right. So communication has to be very strict to only authorized personnel to be able to talk to media, to the regulators, to the government and the states, and to various associated parties and stakeholders. So they should be aware of who does the communication, what is spoken, when it is being communicated. It has to be at the right time, as early as possible, and why it is being done. Also with the which and the wheres that get associated with it. And it has to be transparent enough. That's the second part of communication. And it has to be early enough so that people are not left in the dark of what has happened. Yeah, thank you.
So let me ask Biju. Hello, can you hear me, Biju?
Ah, yes, yes. Yeah, so I fully agree with what Dibu and Ashton mentioned. So, in addition to that, regarding I would like to add upon the incident response part. So, when we mention about a cyber attack or any kind of incident being detected, the most critical thing to do is to respond very quickly so that the damage is minimized. So, that is the most important part. So, for that, it's very important that there is a documented response plan for the maximum kind of incidents. So this is very much required, and I hope that this will be available with every kind of institution where there is a centralized security operations center which manages the monitoring and incident handling mechanism. So when we talk about banks, the Reserve Bank of India also has mandated having a documented IRP as part of the cyber crisis management plan. This is part of the cyber security framework which RBI has published in 2016 itself. So it's very critical for every organization, and we also maintain that. And it's not only that we need to document an IRP, it is very essential that it is refreshed dynamically as and when we come across any new kind of incidents, and also the response plans that is really live in the current environment. It's also very important that the incident handling team, whether it is a part of CISOC or a separate team, they are well aware of these procedures, and they are periodically refreshed through that. This helps to contain the incidents, if any, at a very quick pace. So that is why the IRP is very relevant.
You. I want to ask all of you whether you have had some incidents which either your organization or some other organization which you are aware of in public. How was the incident response? How was the communication? What actions were taken? And was there any forensics done which you are aware of? You don't have to take the names of the companies maybe, or whether it's your company or not. But I want the audience to understand how these incidents occur, because everyone keeps on saying that every day so many hackers would have tried to get into your system, things would have happened. But everyone says it doesn't happen to me, it happens to someone else. So let's look at some example which has happened in the past, either in your organization or another. Don't have to mention the organization. Give us a actual what happened, what are the incident response, and what are the forensics that we did. Anyone? Maybe Ashton?
So again, I will not get into a particular example at this point of time, Shankar, not really for my organization per se, again, because that would not be allowed as per our policies. But just in general, to answer your query, incidents occur because of something that has not been planned. As Biju said, usually incident response plans have everything fully covered, various scenarios, etc., that are covered. But an incident will usually occur for something that has not already been planned, an obvious gap, or something that may have not been interpreted in the right way, where you may have a scenario covered in the plan, but maybe the fourth and the fifth dimension of the scenario may have not been thought about. Okay. Secondly, incidents also occur. One is because of human error, and a majority of the incidents are ideally linked to human error, or maybe because it's intentional. So intentional errors, either by way of insider threats or external, are also why incidents occurred, because someone is definitely has a particular objective of targeting you and your system. So these are where breaches come for. These are where incidents occur. And as part of any efficient response mechanism, you would have ideally needed to prepare for it. Secondly, it would be how quick and how fast you are in terms of detecting and analyzing this. It just doesn't stop there though. You would then need to contain it so that it doesn't spread out to the entire organization. It could have been maybe within one unit, within one module, within one system. You need to contain it just there. Then is when you need to also eradicate it. So just by containing it is not enough. You need to basically flush it out and be also able to recover back to where you were originally prior to the breach. And most importantly, lessons learned is always what is required. So you need to basically get into this, learn from the breach, learn from the error, learn from the mistake, and be able to do enough of post-event analysis, audits, etc., to be able to learn from it and better your incident plan or your incident response. Okay, I know my summation has been a bit more generic in nature. I have not got into the specifics as you have requested, but this is what I could actually share with the audience and with the team.
So Shankar, to add, so Shankar, to add to what Ashton said, I think Ashton has covered it quite nicely, even though he said it was generic. Basically, 2-3 aspects. One, of course, I think a lot of firms today, have tightened their mechanisms, so much that while you do read about, these incidents in newspapers, the incidents are obviously few and far between compared to what they could have been, had every company's, fortress been breached. So I think that's point number one. Point number two, again, I agree with Ashton. I think it may be a little difficult to get into each incident, but I can just share some solutions, which some firms have come up with, based on what has happened. One is sometimes the gateway to a particular entity can be static. How do you make it dynamic? Because it's a little easier to break a static tool, right? Whereas if it is dynamic, so let's say for example, like let's take a VPN, right? The password keeps changing every now and then, right? So I think that's one way. How do you move from static to dynamic? The other is sometimes in terms of the authorized personnel, right? You move from an access based on just one person to multiple persons, because then it just becomes that much more difficult, right? Whether it's insider threat to the point that Ashton made, or human errors, right? Because if there are multiple people, then obviously the threat gets mitigated. So that is the second one. The third is today, if you look at cyber security, let's say you work with an advisor, as in any firm signs up with an advisory firm. Now, no matter whoever it is, right? At the end of the day, there is a standard module which is there in place, right? By and large, maybe 80 to 90% or 70 to 80%. But where I think each firm can make a difference is, how do you go beyond what everybody knows? Because if you were to pick up some standard cybersecurity course, or look at what some advisory firms have to offer, right? That everybody knows, right? How do you go beyond that? Because that is a real danger, right? How do you go beyond the surface to the to the innermost reaches? That is one. And the other is nothing like enrolling your own teams into the effort, because the weaknesses in your own system are best known to folks inside the company, right? So how do you enroll them? How do you create this deterrence? How do you create that culture whereby they can come and tell you these are the gaps which can be filled? So I think if firms were to focus on these 3-4 measures, I think it will go a long way towards mitigating these risks.
Before I give Biju the mic, let me ask you all one question. See, everyone says, if you practice, you become better. And I feel sad because of the nature of the work itself. We can't actually talk about real incidents. We can't talk about real things happening. Even the trainers don't talk about real things. Let me tell you, wars keep on happening in the IT world all the time. We all are fighting it. And since we know it, we become better at it. But when will the new guys learn? When will there be a cross-company understanding? In informal networks where we trust each other, we do talk of lots of things. So Biju, in finance area, especially that there have been lots of breaches, and not through necessarily IT. There could be social engineering breaches, there could be forensics. As Deepu been mentioning, we know that human beings are the weakest links. But let me tell you, he might have talked about, and people would have thought about human links only in the existing IT organization or the organization we are talking of. But people know about and aware of Easter eggs, the quality of software, the documentation of software, the connectivity, what's happening around the world. How do we give some basic examples to the audience that we have? I know we have an audience of learned people as well as people who are trying to learn. So Biju or anyone, let's start with Biju.
Yeah, so as Deepu mentioned, the weakest link or the strength of the chain is as good as the strength of the weakest link. And as far as cyber security is concerned, the weakest link is the human being itself. So we have to, when we mention about mitigating attacks, we have to start with the users first. So creating awareness among the users, that's a big challenge itself. All of us has to agree that, because take any organization, the users or employees will be of varying levels. Their literacy levels, as far as security is concerned, that will be of varying levels. So a multi-pronged strategy will be needed to create awareness among the users for certain. So that every organizations are now into that, because everyone knows about the various kind of attacks. And mostly, if you take attacks in any organization, more than 90% of the attacks have come through a phishing mail or a phishing activity. So many kind of steps are needed to ensure that the employees of an organization stays ahead of the various cyber threats. So it includes from awareness activities like simple emailers, periodic circulars, to e-learning sessions. It can be online sessions, adaptive sessions. Then in addition to that, conducting periodic simulated exercise to ensure the people or the employees are aware and to test their standards. That's also very much necessary to test their levels. And based on the results of that activity, some kind of adaptive activities also happen, because we cannot expect everyone to achieve 100% cyber literacy by taking an e-learning session or by publishing a circular. So whoever needs more information about the details, we will certainly have to provide that by way of next levels. So that is the way many organizations are handling that as far as the user awareness is concerned.
Let me talk about something like us don't talk about. Worldwide, we talk about numbers, how many incidents occurred, what was the action taken, etc., etc. So, how do we get Indian numbers published? So many incidents occurred. So many were banks, so many were financial institutions, so many were manufacturing organizations. How many people were blacklisted? When they go out and check for a new job, how do we ensure that such people who have been unethical, sometimes only one incident or by mistake, but many times we see that it's a trend or it's a way of behavior. Earlier, people didn't really bother about PR or how my company's image is gone. But today, in the connected world, everyone is worried. And we hardly ever see any person involved in this being blacklisted or others knowing that this is a guy who's done this mistake or purposely. How do we look at this incident response? That's one question. And second is there lack of communication to the general public with regard to cyber security incidents that are happening in India? Because the Aam Aadmi only knows about the socially engineered instances, where you share the OTP or a password or some other details, but they are not aware of what's happening in companies, what kind of incidents are happening, and how do companies stop, so that they know that if they invest in your company shares, for instance, if you are a listed company, or if they are dealing with you as a customer, that their money is safe or their details are safe. Anyone? Maybe Ashton can start with this.
Okay, Shankar. So, interesting point and interesting queries that you have put across. So, in terms of your first query, are we as transparent as a nation, as an industry, in sharing the number of incidents and breaches? Then the answer right now is a clear no. I don't think we have got a single source or a single reference point of all the incidents and breaches that occur. And although each of us have made statements saying that we should be transparent, incidents should be reported as soon as possible, as soon as they are known, etc., I don't think all organizations are still doing it. Again, and there are various reasons and factors involved in this, reputation being one of them. Also the fact of how this information is used and where is it used, who all receive it, etc. Once it gets shared, also other factors. Again, there's no right or wrong in this. These are all areas of gray. But the bottom line is that in India right now, it is not as advanced and as transparent as it may be in the Western world. Okay, I'm not comparing oranges to oranges here in any way, and I'm not saying that they are better off than us, because once we reach there, we may see that there may be some hidden agendas even there. But again, that's not right now, not for us to judge on. The ground situation in the country, though, is that it is not where it could ideally be. To put it very short in summary, so but we are getting there. As I said, the regulator has been proactive enough within the banking space, and Biju and me are part of the same banking setup. We basically are regulated by the same central bank. RBI has been pretty proactive. They have been acting, taking out circulars, putting up instructions on how breaches should be detected, what is the time lag, or what is the time interval between which they should be shared, etc. And they have been providing a guidance. So there is some consistency within the banking setup in terms of how we report, when we report, and what we report. So we will soon get there, as other regulators also pick up the queue if they have not already done that. Then there will be some consistency, and soon we should be able to get into a position where we say we have enough information to be able to do regular reporting on incidents, breaches, that will help industry in general, both the common public as well as the experts, to be able to tackle cybersecurity in a much better way. To the second question that you have asked in terms of general public awareness and the fact that they only know of maybe one part of it around social media hacks and breaches, and not maybe about the second angle or the inside angle with organizations. Again, that could be true to a large extent as well. Where, as far as possible, wherever organization can go into the public domain on any breach or any lessons learned, ideally they should do it. But largely the onus of being able to educate general public should ideally lie with the state. Okay, that's where it is best come. That's the source that is most trusted in terms of getting this information out. Industry can assist and facilitate the passing of the information into the state and hand-holding the state on it. But if you need a single point of reference for public awareness, then it should be through the state. Again, that's my individual and personal take on the matter.
Yes, Deepu, anything you have to say on this? Because we require statistics. I know that we can't give because of company's reputation, but customers feel it's one-sided. I'll give an example. When we started online transactions, when we started people doing things, people thought online transactions make it cheaper both for the customers as well as the companies. And then we see whenever we do digital transactions, there is an extra surcharge on it or extra cess on it or something of that sort. Instead of making it cheaper, it's becoming costlier and riskier. How do we give an assurance? The only way to give assurance is on statistics. And another thing is that whenever you use something, as you must be aware, even today when we are speaking, bandwidth is a major issue. And whenever you have security, the bandwidth requirements double, triple, or go multiple times. You use VPN, for instance, or VDI. How do we reduce the bandwidth issues for the customer? And how do we get customers to understand what we are going through? Is one thing I think we should stress on, because today as a customer, I am totally mad at the IT related issues with financial institutions that I deal with. Obviously, let me tell you, just for clearance sake, though I belong to an exchange, I am not allowed to transact on exchanges. So I can't speak about exchange customer and how he gets it. But I can speak about a bank or maybe a mutual fund, etc. So please tell me, Deepu.
So I think Shankar, to both your points, one is on customer awareness, which is what we just spoke about, and then your earlier query around transparency and statistics. I think Ashton has, of course, covered the ground, in fairly good detail. If you see, it becomes a little difficult, practically speaking, to collate data on areas, which can create reputational risks, to various entities involved, right? So we need to figure out, ways and means of, doing that. One could be to ask for, the self-validation or self-assessment note from the various entities involved. That could be one. The other is, I think, to figure out this standard line of, what is in it for me, right? So basically, if we are able to encourage firms to say that if you share with one another, where it's going to help you is, one, obviously information sharing helps you, in faster detection and therefore helping the entire ecosystem. So I think if we can bring in those, there has to be some drivers, right? Either from a carrot or a stick perspective, to get this entire thing going. The second aspect there, Shankar, is from a statistics perspective. I think some firms may rightfully think that maybe I should put it out there only when it has actually created impact. Because if you're also going to talk about, attempts, then customers may start to get very wary, because attempts will always be there, especially in the cyber world. It's very easy because there are no longer borders, right? Anybody from outside the country at any time, day, night, can attack you. So if we keep talking about the fact that there have been so many attempts and we kept on doing it, may sometimes end up creating more fear than is required. So a fine balance is required between communicating the right manner and not, creating a sense of panic. So I think that's the two dimensions, on the first aspect. Now coming to a second aspect, about customer awareness and how do we get customers to adopt it. I think one thing which we all need to understand is that as human beings, it's slightly ironical that the moment we move from one paradigm to another paradigm, suddenly in terms of statistics, the bar gets raised. And there was this person who was saying that when it comes to, let's say, driverless cars, that it killed one person, and there was a huge hue and cry. And that person said, driverless cars, one person killed, there's a huge hue and cry. Everyday cars with drivers kill so many people. Why there is no hue and cry there? So somewhere, when you get used to something, you kind of accept it. But the moment it's a new paradigm, you want perfection from day one. So I think somewhere there, we'll have to tell customers, from an adoption perspective, that when you move from one paradigm to another paradigm, the second paradigm is not utopia. It's not a zero risk, 100%, perfection driven, paradigm, right? There will be, for example, the traffic jam which is there today on physical highways could very well be there on, digital highways tomorrow. So people have to come to terms with the fact that maybe it's better, but it won't be perfect. So I think as long as, we're able to, get customers going in that direction, I think, there will be maturity in terms of the acceptance of some of the risks. And hopefully, that will also lead to an uptake, in digital assets.
Dipu, I beg to differ a little bit here.
Shankar, I can just submit a couple of things here. Interesting thoughts by Dipu as well as you. On the driverless cars, I just wanted to share an anecdote. It's so something that I read actually in this. So they're saying for a driverless car, if you actually on the road and a very small toddler comes in front of the car, and you have just one choice to make. Will you stay loyal to the owner of the car and save the driver, or you'll save the toddler? And it's a catch-22 in a way, because either ways, you are going to, the AI or the intelligence that is in that car is going to be at fault. If they save the toddler, they have not been loyal to the owner, the person who's bought the car. And vice versa, it's not humanitarian if you say, yes, I will run over the toddler. So that's the problem with intelligence and with something which related to technology against humans, because that will still be linked to human error, and it will be termed as an accident if it was a human on the steering. Okay, so that's what it's one point. To your other query and your example that you shared, Shankar, earlier, in terms of the digital and charges, surcharges, as well as risk, then to be very honest, I don't see an option there. I think it is part of business ethics. Hidden charges should never be hidden from the customer. Okay, that's up to the ethics of the organization. If there's a charge associated, then it should be you have to be transparent about it. There are no two ways on it. There's no can we do it or can we not. It has to be shown, and people have to be made aware of it.
Sorry, I want to stop you here. I'm not talking of hidden charges. I'm just saying if I buy something physically, I get at X rupees. If I buy it electronically by using an online transaction, I am charged X plus. Whereas customer expectation is because it's online, it should be cheaper because I'm saving the trouble of a human being taking cash from me. That cash goes to the bank and sits inside, etc., etc. But
Okay,
the other way
fair enough.
and I'm put a petrol surcharge.
So fair enough. But again, so my point here was, as long as that plus is known to the customer, then it's an individual choice that the customer makes. I know in the case of a pandemic, it's a forced choice. It's not. It's no longer a choice because you have to be digital. You cannot afford to go to a physical branch. But as long as the plus is known, that is not the problem I have. I have a problem if the plus is not known as hidden. and only after it's incurred do you see it as part of the cost that has come to you. So that was what I was calling out on. And that is not where I would compromise on transparency and say for the sake of reputation, etc. We could look at whether we want to share it. There are no tools, ifs and buts on that.
Ashton, I'll again counter you. I am in a shop. I bought a Colgate, some toothpaste. He asked me to pay online. What's the fun? You are touching me, giving me a physical toothpaste and don't want to take physical cash. And then yet charge a surcharge on it because you are doing an online transaction. So that is what I'm talking about. Most of the time we go to the grocer or we buy things. I want to buy a car. I'm visiting the showroom, seeing the car and then making the payment. If I do online, you will charge me so much %. So that's one. Second, when you talk about, you gave an example, Deepu, about car and driverless car and human being and all. Let me tell you, when a real accident occurs, we know whose number was, the car number we know the people involved, we know the things, it comes in the newspapers. The same thing doesn't happen when a driverless car goes. First of all, you don't know who to blame. The software guy will say, my software is correct, but hardware is wrong. The hardware guy say, I have given correct, but it was not implemented properly. So all these things are very big questions. But let me come back again to the same. I'm going to be persistent. Like we have in real life, don't go by this road. There are lots of potholes. There are such things even Google Maps gives today. Whereas in cyber incidents, we don't allow each other to learn from each other. I'm not saying you should talk about your organization. You talk about your organization that you left 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago. But give an FAQ saying, this is the incident occurred, this is what happened, this is the actual hardware, software that failed, this is the thing that happened, and this is how we took. It's like an FAQ for future cybersecurity fighters. In fact, our country, we are talking of, say, sovereign nation, we are talking of state actors. We have been banning some apps. Lots of my students, when I teach them cybersecurity and resilience, they ask me, by banning certain apps, are we going to get a sovereignty? And then I would tell him or her that this is only the legal way to put it. Actually, it's only a commercial decision. Because one app, if you call an app ABC today, I can get the same code, same app, call it XYZ, coming from some other nation, and it's not going to affect your sovereignty. So, I'm again coming back and saying, if we want to improve Indians, especially our country's understanding about incidents in cybersecurity or otherwise, we want communication to happen, people to know what is happening. We have to start getting out statistics and some examples without names and some exemplary punishments. You have a guy who goes into an organization because he gets a salary which is X. Someone offers him Y with corporate espionage or for money. Data leaks out. Don't you want to highlight this guy? I know it's a human being. I know it's career at stake. But if a guy is doing it knowingly, should other organizations not know that this guy is wrong? When are we going to start doing it? In the media, see, I handle or look after the media and marketing for my organization. And I see that the media doesn't want to talk about critical issues. Normally people say that this is an authority. So if they fail, they talk about it. What's the use of just praising that authority for doing good? You have to also give critical feedback, which we are lacking in cybersecurity area also today, which is a hard area. It's a very difficult area. Can we as financial institutions, financial organizations take up the start and at least start collecting statistics? Sit together, work together, don't give the names, but at least say, okay, in Bombay region, out of 100 institutions, there were 2 incidents that occurred this week. Those 2 incidents were of this type and this action was taken. Let people know, at least those students of cybersecurity and those customers and other organizations. That's how we learn. Otherwise, we are not going to learn by practice at all. We are just going to use generic words. We learn only in our organizations and only that type of response that we do. And we are not going to learn. So, any idea, Biju, can we start with you this time?
Yes, what you mentioned is like a catch-22 situation, like you and Ashton mentioned. So it's who will start first? However, having said that, I will say that Indian financial institutions have started the journey. The regulator also has taken correct steps in that line, because only by sharing the details about an incident, others also can learn about that and take timely action. Then again, Deepu presented that in the correct way. So if the current situation is that if one institution straight away goes and discloses about the incident, so the customers or the end users, they are not going to take it lightly because the current culture is like that. So it's a gradual change. It will happen for sure. It is happening. It's already happening in the banking industry. However, the first response will be to hide it so that the reputation is not hit. But in many cases, what we see is that initially it is hidden, but maybe after 1 week or 2 weeks, the incident will come to highlight, and then the reputation is again badly hit. So it's a question whether to report at the first instance itself or to wait for some more time. However, from a customer standpoint, it's a prudent strategy to give the adequate information in a transparent manner without creating panic. So the culture has to build, and the industry as well as the people as well as the customers have to accept that no, whatever said and done, 100% the security is a myth. So every organization can take earnest steps to ensure that attacks do not happen. But in spite of taking whatever precautions, no one can give a guarantee that no security incident will happen. So whenever it happens, it has to be announced. So what happened, what went wrong. So that will help the users also to take adequate precautions from their credentials being leaked out in the public. Because like if it's a password that has been leaked out, so if the information is rightly passed out, the users can take prompt corrective action. They can change the passwords like that so that the damage is minimized, even if the data is published, leaked data is published.
Dipu,
Yeah, so I think Shankar, I need to admire your tenaciousness in terms of persisting with this query, and I think there are a few aspects to be brought to the fore here. One is to your point around how do we get information sharing happening without creating panic. So one I was just thinking about the solution as Viju was speaking. One could be that you might get complete transparency if let's say it happens in a closed user group. So let's say for example the CISOs of various companies get together and they discuss ways and means by which they can educate one another without creating panic at large. So that could be one solution. The other is maybe firms can, and as the point we discussed earlier about how do you incentivize firms. One could be that we also ask firms to share it with the regulator or with whichever body which is there, and of course with no threat of being penalized, so that you can't expect to have penalty and sharing going freely as long as this does not affect customers. I'm talking about that. And then maybe you collate everything in an aggregate manner so that it's not any one specific firm, but you may come out and say that we have seen this month that there have been 20 attempts. One attempt was through the user, this attempt was through this, so that people can learn from actual incidents in no way you're able to identify the company or the firm. That way you can get to your point, because ultimately the key here is how do you learn, right? And I remember one line from the Dalai Lama. He said, when you lose, don't lose the lesson, right? So how do you pick up all the lessons so that others can learn? So I guess if we can look at these 2-3 ways of doing it, then hopefully all these people can meet your persistent query. You're on mute, Shankar. You're on mute, Shankar. You're on mute.
let them open. The host has to unmute. Okay, he's unmuted.
Okay.
Let me counter your questions or answers, and I add some points. One is you talked about closed user group of a certain kind. I doubt that works, because that is like people who are competing against each other in careers. They are not going to speak the thing. So let's be very clear. It may not happen, but yes, it could be a closed user group where we are friends. That's one. Second is, I also have realized, especially when I teach my students, I said, okay, you don't want to give your failures and where actually things happened wrong, but at least give the places where something happened and you did right and you saved the organization from something. Even those kind of examples don't come. Third is, we've been trying to get vendors. I personally, I know vendors, like say I'll talk to you or Ashton or anyone. I've been trying to tell them, vendors have statistics. If today, when I use O365 for instance, I know my quarantine, my mails are quarantined based on the world view of what domains they are, who they're coming from, etc. How do they do it? Does that not affect the names and reputations? If they do, then why can't they talk about India? If they are present in India, they have the obligation, whether ethical, moral, or national requirement, that they report to the government. These are the incidents that happen. Third, there is a problem with testing. We've talked about testing and being ready for it and all for incidents. There's a rule in VAPT, you guys all know about it, where you talk, okay, if the first layer cannot be broken, you open the first layer, allow the thread to go to the second layer, third layer to test their tenacity and how to do it. I can tell you almost all CISOs I've spoken to. You don't have to say whether it's your company you have done, but you can talk about everyone excluding yours. Most of the CISOs have told me, hey, boss, I will not purposefully open the first door to someone to test my second door. So I want to know whether in reality, do we do penetration tests which do this? And question one more aligned with it is, how many people have we punished not in your organization? Because once I ask you about your organization, Ashton will give a standard clarification. Yes, I cannot talk about it now. Everyone has the same problem. But at least let us talk about someone you heard of, whether the person was penalized, something penalty to the company, etc. But let's look at it. I leave the floor open. Maybe Biju, Ashton, Deepu, whoever wants to speak.
So I'll just start by maybe sharing a perspective from a different perspective, on what you said. That typically when we look at cybersecurity, and this thought struck me because right now on a topic as serious as cybersecurity, all of us were the last few minutes smiling and laughing and talking. Then I was just suddenly thinking that how do you also make this topic fun and amenable to the public at large, right? Because the moment you say cybersecurity, it can become a very esoteric topic, and people may say let's leave it to the experts, right? Now one is to also move from, let's say, penalty to reward, right? For example, can we think about how do you make cybersecurity fun for everyone, right? I mean, it may be a very odd term today. Cybersecurity and fun may look like an oxymoron, right? They're together in the same sentence. And the other is, how can you look at rewards? And let me give you one example. Again, I'll not take the name, but it's a well-known and a positive side, but it's a well-known example. So what used to happen is, we used to get a lot of these firms, coming and pitching to us about why BCP is important. And the moment they go into the presentation, it becomes a very dry and boring one in explaining what is BCP, how do you do BCP, and all of that. And I was just thinking at that time that what they could have done, if you are, let's say, communicating not to the closed user group of experts, but to the entire management team at large, is, for example, you pick and talk about, let's say, 9/11, because there is this well-known company, right, which during 9/11 had a BCP and therefore they were active, and their customers could get card transactions carried through, and they were also able to contact their customers and convey empathy, so on and so forth, right? It just showed that at that moment when it mattered most, they were there, they were available for their customers. Is then to play this and say that look at what happened during this incident. While you think BCP may not be important, right, but this is what happened. When you had an actual incident, this firm was alive and kicking. They could help their customers go beyond regular transactions, so on and so forth. Customers for life, right? So from that perspective, and if you can also look at it from a reward perspective, what happens if you, because we always talk about, even if you look at our own conversation, right, it's all about what goes wrong, how can we penalize, right? On the positive side, if somebody catches, right, how do you reward them? I think when you also look at the positive side of things, then I think a lot of people, start to participate because of the fear factor goes away. So I just wanted to, bring into this example, that dimension.
But let me talk to you from a little, just an example on my side. We are a very threatened organization. There are many organizations that are threatened. People do dummy exercises. Like you try and get a weapon inside. People are very happy to report that they stopped it. 100 times you stop, but one time it goes in. The management, and especially the board level management, they find it difficult. No, why did it happen? They will focus only in that incident. It's like you spent 100 years of your life doing all good, and one day you said something wrong or did something wrong, and everything is gone. I think you are right that we should reward. In fact, normally what I do is my students, I tell them that the organization that you work with, you tell me the incidents from there. So as you said, a group, I've got a large students group who tell me the incidents that occur real time. And I can tell you, I really enjoy learning more about it. Maybe you guys also are doing it in your own way. But the incidents that occur in India are worrisome. Why am I saying worrisome is, our managements, the people who give money to us, they don't realize the task that we have at our hand. The task can only be stopped if you get right tools. The pricing of right tools is not in our hand. when you compare to dollar or euro, our Indian rupee is quite inadequate to get the same amount of budget. And when the companies don't make enough money on the same, you will cut corners, you will take certain facilities, you will not take certain facilities. And when that certain thing happens, then you start saying, oh, I would have sent 5% more, I would have saved myself. Has that occurred to any of you guys? Is that something that we should tell our management that, boss, when we say, we also organization people, we don't want to overspend, but it's like saying, if COVID is going to happen to some people or the other, I would wear a mask, I would take care, I would not go into public spaces where crowds are there. And that doesn't mean that I'm spending more time or trying to be worried about a risk. It is a real risk. In IT, we are always on tenterhooks. Especially, I'll tell you where CISO the organization get wrong. Everyone wants to verify me or any customer. Then what happens is, if all people are trying to verify, I don't know whether how many of them are taking my credentials and trying to misuse somewhere. So we should have a unified KYC. Like for instance, all mutual funds used to ask earlier. Today, I have one KYC for financial transactions. Can we have something like that for cyber security related? One place where you identify me and then you use a simple mechanism so that at least identity theft will be reduced. So something like that can we do about cyber security incidents? Please go ahead. Did you, Deepu?
I already spoke, so I'll let Biju and
again,
Ashton take it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Shankar, to your two questions. One, as you said, in terms of budget cuts and constraints. So in general, with the pandemic, there have been squeezes on the budgets with most organizations. But having said that, if you look at it in a slightly different sense, with all the squeeze and the cuts within the cybersecurity space, it has been the highest in terms of percentage of allowance. So the cuts have been more into into some other IT segments or the non-IT spends, but they are still given the leeway because they know that the risk has expanded multiple fold. Surface area of the risk has expanded with the entire remote working. So in this day and time, I'm sure most of the CISOs would not have too many complaints on the budgets because they know that even with the cuts that have been enforced at the organization level, they have still got a sufficient kitty to be able to cater to the risk that they may have not got in the earlier BAU world. So that's my personal take on the matter. To your second query, where you had spoken about, and I think it just slipped my mind. Your second query was
Getting data collated through various means, including the vendors, etc.
getting data collated to various means. When you say it is something that vendors have, as you have already mentioned, they have got huge databases, they have got huge data mines on this data. It's something that comes at a cost. So if you are interested in the service, in the product that they would provide, they are more than willing to share that data with you because it helps justify their product and their service to you. If you have the budget for them, if you have the appetite to be able to procure their product and their service, then they will have all the data that they can share with you. If you want the data complementarily or freely available, then that is something that's still not available within the community and with the country.
But Ashton, we have got the same thing happen to individual customers. I remember buying firewalls and antiviruses myself, and then a day came when everyone gave it free to all customers. I'm not talking about giving free to organizations, but can we give it free to certain people who cannot afford it, or the pricing could be different? Something we'll have to do, because if one weakest link in the whole chain, say financial chain, there's a payment gateway and there's an organization. The payment gateway is very well certified, tried, everything, but the organization leaks the data by mistake. The payment gateway also gets blamed, because for a customer, it's one unified transaction. So don't you think that these big organizations, they have a reporting requirements? I'm just talking about reporting requirements. I'm not even talking about actually giving their product free.
So again, coming to your reporting requirements, one is whether someone can proactively share data, etc., and all is still a cultural mindset change that we have still not reached as a country. So that is something that we have to still cross the hurdle when we reach it. We are still not there. Having said that, and I come now back to the banking industry example, because that's where I function and I work with. Uh, we have been compliant to whatever the regulator mandates us. So it is, you could call it a reactive sort of an approach, not really proactive, but we have been compliant, and we have been following all the rules and the procedures that have been set out by the regulator for any reporting that is required on these aspects. So if we have to report something within a particular period of time, within a particular interval, in a particular format with some particular information and data, we have tried to be compliant with all of that. So as long as you are pushed to doing something, mostly organizations do it, but we have still not got a cultural mindset aligned to proactively doing it. That's what I would say on this matter.
Biju, your view?
Yeah, I fully agree with Ashton. As far as banking industry is concerned, there is a formal structure for sharing of any incidents. So there's the IDRBT, which is hosted by RBI, is doing a very good service in that aspect. So details of incidents are collated. Actually, it is shared by banks, and IDRBT collates that information. Similarly, CERTIN also, India CERT is also doing a good job in collecting the information, and they are also sharing that with the rest of the industry. So if we debate about that, no, good progress is happening in the days about sharing of information. And banks, we can say that banks are taking the lead in that. The regulator is also pushing all the banks to share timely about any incident that occurs.
Can we have, summarizing all of you, can we have some method? We can sit together if you want, we can form a group, working group required. Can we have a method by which such information is disseminated and slowly make the database for India stack, that these are the incidents that are occurring, how do we stop them? And it can be a voluntary effort. Let me tell you, it's the people who contribute most to this kind of data. They are the biggest guys who benefit also. I believe that as being a teacher, I'll tell you, I teach lots of students, and I've learned more from my students than myself, because they are the guys who encounter all these things every day. For example, I still remember many years back, Easter eggs, and which are even today, though we test our software and all, there are so many Easter eggs available. No one talks of it. We have got reward system for people who identify bugs. I have got responses where a person has said, I sent this to XYZ organizations. First, they said, yes, we already know about this bug. So they don't try to give the reward that is actually due, and it's a small reward. The money is not the question. The question is of reputation, as Deepu rightly said. If they accept that I was not aware of this particular bug or the problem, then they have to not only share the money, but there's a reputation risk. They have to reduce this risk. Once upon a time, if you are a victim of some crime, it was considered sad, if you report it. Today, the shame is not on the victim. The shame is on the perpetrator. In a cybersecurity incident, when we talk about incident response and communication and forensics, we have to remove that shame. We are here to learn. And yes, we have to punish those who purposely do it. Inadvertent mistakes, it will occur as progress occurs. The chores are always ahead of the police. And this is not going to stop. As you go more and more deep, the guys who learn are the people who actually commit crimes. In fact, I can tell you or share this secret. I've always learned more from people who committed crimes. Always, because they know what they did, they know where they were caught, they know how they could have stopped. And in cybersecurity, we have to do ethical hacking has been there for a long time, but I have not seen incident responses, communication, how do you stop identity threats, cyber crimes, and how do you do the forensics. Even today for forensics, like earlier times, there were small detectives. I see lots of small agencies, a lawyer here, a technician there, who start their small organizations of 2 people or 10 people and they try to do forensics. I remember a case when a lawyer said that someone had copied the whole software and just taken his employee who pirated the software. He just had to open the computer in front of the judge, look at the source code, and you can see the same variable names, including the names of the daughters and children of the promoters or the software writers. So it was easily proven that it's caught. Today in the IT world, we require to create such standard mechanisms, which are already there in, as you know, in the on the net for public, but we are not certifying, we are not teaching. We should do it. In summary, I believe that all of us have to contribute towards this so-called knowledge repository and update it and take students. Like we have PhD guides, I believe each organization should allow 2-3 students to learn from them. Will they allow? Will they allow them to learn? Will they allow them to keep the confidential reports to themselves? We have to learn from them. Any of you have views about how we can do better in this whole area? I leave it free for you all to talk about it.
I think since we're ahead of time, I'll just quickly share a perspective. One is any such committee, half in seriousness, we ought to make you the chairman because of your persistence. The second thing is that from an overall perspective, I think there are two aspects typically in any such area. One is the human being, and the other is the tool. I think a lot of focus today is on the tool. I think we just need to focus on the human being going forward. Broadly, that's what I have to say.
Biju?
Yeah, fully agree with Debu. So it's a combination of tools and investment in humans. So we have to balance that and ensure that both sides are perfect.
Ashton?
Shankar, coming to the point you made, that's the ideal state. That's the ideal place we would like to be. We still to get there, and we still a fair distance to walk to get there, is what I would say. I will end with a very lighter comment. Something like this open forum is not where I would like to share breaches, etc., because it's an open forum. That doesn't stop me from informally discussing it with friends, etc., if I have to. Okay, and sharing things. But an open forum is not actually something where you would ideally share something. And again, the other aspect to this is like we have with medias also. There are a lot of times where we say receive from anonymous sources. So sometimes information is best shared in that form where the person who's sharing the information is left anonymous.
Thank you, Ashton. And let me tell you, like Deepu said, it's been very interesting. It's very difficult to have smiling and laughing people in a cybersecurity threats and incident response kind of forensics kind of discussion. But I'm very glad to all my friends here, and it's been fun to be with you. Let me tell you one thing: when we are persistent, and I know CISOs and cybersecurity and IT ops people are really persistent, especially during these COVID times. I can admire the guts of keeping the systems running. India seems to be on top in the world, where COVID has not really affected us so much because of the IT people. And that's a great achievement of Indians. Of course, we are also winning over COVID, it looks like, though we have to be sharply vigilant. I believe that going forward in recent time, near future, we will see some action on these points. Because I remember once I had just started, I just ignited the spark, and today it's been grown into a big tree. Likewise, I am suggesting to all my IT friends and cybersecurity friends, let's start, let's getting information, let's put it, even if that information is vague initially, it will become sharper. We will be the cyber warriors of the world, and we will try to be up and in front of it. Thank you all, and I sign off from here. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Been good,
Thank you.
discussing in this panel. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks all co-panelists. Nice to have discussion with you all. Thanks and bye.
Thank you, co-panelists.